All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Cyber Sensei, the definitive podcast for cybersecurity educators brought to you by Cyberbit. If it's your second or third time listening to us, welcome back. For those that are here for the first time, welcome. My name is Sharon. I'm the CMO at Cyberbit. I'm joined by Mr. Adam Bricker, a widely recognized cybersecurity education expert. Hi, Adam. And
Hello.
our special guest, Nick Mumma. Great to have you here both. Nick Mumma is a cybersecurity incident response and training leader and formerly at American Express, and we'll introduce everyone formally in just a second. Just a quick reminder and some housekeeping. We are now live. We'll be opening up for questions after about 30 minutes of our discussion. So if you want to ask a question, all you need to do is raise your hand in the Zoom user interface, and we will unmute you. We will explain later on how to do that. You can also send us questions anytime in the Q&A section of the chat. You can see a Q&A in the bottom of your screen, and we'll be sure to answer them once we get to the Q&A part of this live session. This session is recorded. It will be available on all leading podcast platforms. We will be sharing the link with you by email after the session, and you can also find it on Cyberbit's LinkedIn profile. Adam, hi there.
Hi, Sharon. Glad to meet you again and see you again from different parts of the world that we're at today. And it's my pleasure to introduce a topic that, we don't hear a lot about when those of us that listen to podcasts and interview experts in the field. And there's this concept of, I've just graduated college, I've just graduated some academy, some boot camp or something, but now I want to get the job of my choice, but I'm not ready to launch. So what's that gap between when you graduated and when that company, a sizable, material, well-run professional cybersecurity operation inside of a corporation says, but you're not ready to hit the ground, you're not ready to launch. And I've known Nick here for a couple of years now and had an enormous respect for the programs he's built in the past. And full disclosure, I hired him to help take my program to the next level at the Carolina Cyber Network and the Carolina Cyber Center. So it's a pleasure to introduce Nick. Nick, why don't you tell the audience a bit about yourself?
Hi, everybody. I'm Nick Mumma. I've been running security operations centers for 23 years now across multiple sectors. Tech, development, utility, medical, financial. And I started as a managed service provider and worked specifically with startups in Southern California for a long time, growing the security from the ground up in corporations that couldn't afford to pay for the big guns, and doing so with outreach and training all of our people from new, actually, as a separate nonprofit. So that's what got me into this, and that's kind of why I was so excited to work with Adam when he was starting up something similar at Carolina Cyber Center.
Nick, thanks. So you're an instrumental part of a major cybersecurity team, but you came to believe that there was a gap between those who have graduated and what you were really ready to employ. How did you come to develop that program? And how did you develop the program, and what was your particular role in it?
So it was my idea, and kind of what we started out with, and the reason we needed to do it was people were coming to us with a lot of knowledge, but without as many of the skills and abilities that we would need to actually get somebody started on their true day one. So I started an 8-week program once we had hired someone to bring them up to speed, both internally and with the gaps we knew they were going to have coming out of anywhere we were hiring them. So that's how we started it. And then we started looking at interns to bring them in as a way to kind of shortcut that process. Why wait for somebody to finish 4 years of college before we start teaching them the hands-on things? Can we bring them in sooner? Can we get them exposed? And then from there, we started looking at community colleges and smaller, shorter programs to see if we could further bootstrap.
How many, I call them, my snarky phrase, these finishing schools, which again, you helped me with, and it was immeasurably successful for the students we had a chance to work with. But how many of these boot camps, how many of these finishing schools did you get a chance to run?
Over the course of my career, I've done probably 10 full classroom, full groups, where we start a series of individuals through a given program. So that would be something like an 8-week program. And then on top of that, hundreds of single individuals coming through as a follow-on, like watching the videos of something that's already been done and then coming back to ask questions rather than like an instructor-led. But that's generally for internal hiring.
Now, when I came to know you, I don't know if I told you this or not, but they introduced you to me as somebody who doesn't suffer fools lightly, that you ran a tough program. But we're not doing the young people any favors by making life easy on them, are we? You must have seen a material gap. 8 weeks may not sound like long, but this is full time, right? And can you describe and Clifford asked a good question in the chat here, can you describe the outline of what that 8 weeks like? How intense was it? And then the third part of that is, what really were the gaps you were trying to close?
Sure. So the basics are assure that they have the requisite networking and system administrative knowledge to understand what good is. You need to know what good is before you can understand what bad is. So we rely heavily on their knowledge for that, but we need to verify it, because if you haven't verified it, you can't move forward on a solid foundation. The second step is to add stress to their environment. Often when we see people coming in, they've learned this in a classroom setting. They aren't trying to perform under a significant stress and task load, which is something that will happen consistently in SOCs. So we need to set that.
You didn't enjoy that too much, did you? You didn't enjoy that stress too much, did you? Okay.
Yeah, there are some people who grew to really hate my voice, and because of my penchant for adding stress to people's lives. But stress builds strength, right? We don't build muscle by looking at people who are doing strength training videos. You have to do it yourself, and it has to hurt a little. If it doesn't hurt, you're not learning. And so we start adding stress, and then we started adding new concepts and forcing people to look forward. And that's that last key: critical thinking and the ability to look forward, to anticipate plans or anticipate the actions of malicious actors is the last part that we start in the finishing school. And that's harder. And that takes, generally speaking, the last 4 weeks of a finishing school is high stress, hands-on all the time. You go in, try something, maybe come out, debrief it, and try the exact same thing again. Learning where your failure points are, so that you can learn to ask new questions and better questions and become a better member of the team when you are actually doing the work and run into those same failure points. You can quickly recognize it and find a team member that can help you. Because I believe really that SOCs are a team sport.
Yeah, and you helped me hone ours. Remember, the last 4 parts was you had collaboration, then grit, and the last part, agency under duress. But all of that was undergirded by humility, the ability to know what you know what you don't know, and have the emotional courage to go act on it. You must have come up with some pretty, I would say, accelerated ways to develop that in students. What were some of the things you saw that helped develop their agency to take action, know what they don't know, and go ask?
So Kobayashi Maru, that is my nickname in several circles. And I start off by writing in no-win scenarios. It's something that comes from some of my past, where I know you you don't get into something in a big breach in the industry, sometimes you don't hear about it until 6 months after they've left. You can't win that. You have to lose that. And so teaching students early that they need to understand that this isn't something that they can win every time, and that they need to ask for help by hitting them early and hard, and then setting them down and say, great, you weren't allowed to win that one. And this is all hands on. So in a range, something where they can't prevent a breach, they're going to have to deal with it. And then you sit them down, you tell them that's great. Yeah, thank you for your effort. It was as good as we expected of you because it was unwinnable. And then once they've been broken down that way, you do it again and start to build up. Now, this is something you can fix. We have something in here that we know you can fix. Go find. If you can't find it, understand that there is something here that exists and ask for help, and then give it. There's a lot of people in industry, unfortunately, that like to be the rock star and don't like to be the team player or the servant leader. And I seek with my teams to make sure that everyone understands that they were new and young once, and they didn't know, and now they should know better what they don't know. But they should also encourage all of the junior analysts to know their own limits, so that they can help and expand those limits and make a better team.
Very cool. So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like you introduce them sometimes for the first time to collaboration in a tough environment, because you knew what success looked like and whether success even existed. You could coach and mentor them through the exercises and help them get better. But you're looking for critical thinking. And I'm leading this up to a question that Carla put in the chat here, where she says, there's 300 level students going through choose their own adventure. And she's talking about a healthcare scenario where they introduce some stress. And she asked this question: what other ways can we introduce stress? And I'll add to her question, not just introduce it, but make it progressively more, as you said, building the character in an individual, because you make it progressively more difficult. What are some of the ways you can introduce that stress to bring out that collaboration and thinking?
Right. So stress is actually really easy to induce in humans. A clock will do it. Just putting a clock on something and saying that, rather than having an hour to do this thing, you have 15 minutes. That is an immense amount of stress that will immediately be felt by every one of your participants. The next step for that is give it a score. So it doesn't matter really what your baseline is, so long as it's a known quantity, right? That's the same thing with testing, that we have to have grades, otherwise tests don't matter. The next bit of that is make it as real as possible. So all of those I use a range to do, whether, and I've been doing that in 20 years now, building ranges, buying ranges, have a range that I can control, and I can add a clock, I can adjust the difficulty, and I can give it a score. And that's all you need to really create the stress involved. Things like the question there, patient death is a real stressor, a real life stressor, and that will that one could actually go too far. If you make that one real enough, you can start triggering people poorly. But the clock and the score are hard to trigger people with, and easy to manipulate in a way that you can create the level of stress that you want.
When you say ranges, you're talking about cyber ranges,
right?
Yeah.
So cyber range is a set of computers and networks available to put students through.
Yeah. By the way,
So
why did you feel that you needed to use a cyber ranges? Did you feel that there is a gap? And I think a lot of the folks here or the audience are really interested to speak to an industry professional who's eventually hiring the graduates. You're the one who's actually hiring the graduates of the audience who's right here, trying to understand what they need to do to produce better graduates, and the need to run them through a cyber range in the organization. Obviously it's valuable, but did you feel that that's something that was maybe missing? There was sort of a gap in some of the graduates that you were hiring, that they kind of lacked this hands-on or real-world experience in order to be completely ready for the workforce?
Yes, I mean that's the quick answer is yes. So you need the hands-on experience to turn your knowledge into skills and abilities, and the ranges allow us to do that in something that's not an industry production environment, right? I can't blow up American Express's financial center
Right.
because I need to train new people.
Right.
But I can build a network that is close enough to American Express's network or to a shell network that I can then train people on, and then introduce them to, well, remember the thing we showed you? That was 80%. Here's the special secret sauce that we don't put out anywhere else. And then they're up and running, closing gaps and then closing gaps.
Right. Okay.
And
Thanks.
Nick, I was wondering, how specific was your exercises in your finishing school to the company you were working for?
So mine's were generally very specific because they'd be proprietary to that company. So we could use I could talk to the security leaders in those companies and ask what their pain points were, find the specific types of attacks that they're undergoing and train to those in particular faster and harder than a broader range of attacks. That's not necessary, but that is, when somebody hires me to do something like that, that's what I do. Some of my original ones with my managed security service provider days, we actually used those same ones as legitimate business syndicate when we came to DevCon. Me and my guys ran the first 6 set of DevCon hackathons, the capture the flags. So some of those early ranges are ones that we use to train our folks back in the day.
So we have a lot of participants in the podcast today listening that are from community colleges, 4 years, et cetera. They're often thinking about concepts, frameworks like the NICE framework to help evaluate the KSAs, the knowledge, skills, and abilities. Did you leverage the NICE framework? And within that, what sort of KSAs and behavior traits were you looking to develop?
Okay, so yes, I love the NICE framework, and it is a framework that is going to go places, and I love it. It takes a lot of time to get the industry to use it, and they're coming around finally. But these corporations are monoliths, and it's going to take a few more years. But we do use it anytime that we can, and like the skills and abilities that we're looking for, we've talked to them a bit. The critical thinking and a prioritization of tasks is a huge one when we're looking through that. And then each of the jobs, so if you look at the job maps with NICE, those are 80% accurate all the time, but they're never 100% accurate. And that's the problem we've had with it in industry is a lot of the HR folks want to have 100% accuracy. But I think from an education perspective, going to the NICE framework will get you the hard 80. And that's what we should be going for as educators.
So you'd mentioned about leveraging a cyber range to help accelerate the students' development collaboration, but also to introduce stress. I'm guessing the more hyper-realistic the range it could be, but also the use of commercial tools. Can you talk a little bit about how you used a range, what was it for, and what tools the students were able to, or your employees at that point were able to leverage in the range?
Sure. So the way we start that is Cybervet has actually made it really easy on me in that I can spool up a cyber range, and I've got a fair set of things already available. So you start with Windows and a network, right? That's the most basic range. A Windows network that runs, anybody can do it. The next step up from there is adding the networking tools, which are, so like Palo Alto would be one of them, or some of the open source, like the Palos that are available in Cyberbit are lovely. Then you can add some EDRs and response platforms to that endpoint data, and then you've got your SOARs or your ticketing engine, whatever that's going to be. So yeah. So if you're in a company that's already got all of those things and has the contracts for it, then you can build it on your own. I've done it. It's a pain, but then you have exactly the tools that you're looking for. Or if you're in a better position to buy it, then somebody like Cyberbit has the access to most of the tools that any of the corporations are going to use in one fashion or other. There may still be things in the specific industry side that aren't there, but those are exactly the kind of things that a company is going to teach every new hire anyway.
So since we worked with you a bit, we as Cyberbit worked with you with regards to our cyber range. I find that a lot of organizations, schools or corporates are not aware that a cyber range that was previously something you either had to build or you had to have a tremendous amount of budgets for that. Today, a lot of that capability is available on demand. So it's built on the cloud, it's spun up really quickly, it's quite accessible. So I think to your point, I think, and there was a question on kind of what is the best level cyber range solution, etc. So now to promote, again, obviously we're in this space, but in general, I think there is, not everyone is aware that today you can basically get a license and go and start doing cyber range exercises in a day. And it's not something you need to build for months or for weeks.
Right. Yeah. There's still the feeling that it's a rack that you have to roll into a room, and it cost $5 million to build and $1 million to lease for this week. Right. It's not that anymore. The cloud has made it so that these things can be spun up. They can be can be done.
It's elastic.
It is, and that it's lovely.
And Dr. Bozilovich, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, asked the question about best entry level cyber range. I think that's a deep question of best and entry level. And Sharon, maybe at a later time we should have a podcast specifically dedicated to the evaluation that we've all done. In fact, Nick and some our mutual friends helped us evaluate a bunch of different tools for the network that we employed. So we can do that at a later time. But
for sure.
And by the way, he wins the name for the best award for the best, coolest name here, Dr. Bozilovich. That's just too cool to be real. That must be a meme. Anyway, but we will come back to that. But Nick, when you are creating, we talked about you're creating scenarios to build their collaboration, their critical thinking, assess them, coach, mentor. You're making it more and more difficult. You're leveraging the KSA from the NICE framework. But summarize all that for us. What are the entry-level jobs you are preparing your students, your employees for?
So generally speaking, we're talking junior analyst and standard analyst. Those are the rule, like SOC analyst. So that's the job title. The job itself is going to be looking at events and making decisions about those events, whether they're a standard business as usual activity, or they're a malicious activity. That's what they are. They're the first set of human eyes after we've gone through a programmatic evaluation of these events. So we try to get, say, 10,000 events down to 1,000 events before it goes through the sets of filters, before it becomes 100 events that a junior analyst might see. And their job is to look at that and look at those 100 things in 12 hours and understand what they are well enough to say this is good or bad. The next step is a standard analyst whose responsibility is to look at that a little bit more broadly and be able to think about fixes to turn thousands of events into tens of events. When it comes to that, that's the very broadest of jobs that they have. So what do they need to do that is they're going to need an eye for detail. They're going to need critical thinking skills, and they're going to need we generally will call it a gut sense for right and wrong, and that's what my general boot camps are about teaching them. Like I said, you need to know right before you can know wrong, and you need the experience on a network to know that this event, even though it appears anomalous today, is because it's the last day in a quarter. So somebody is pulling down every single piece of their data so that they can make a report today. It's normal into a business. So those are critical thinking skills and knowledge of a network that we can't really train AI to do, but we need somebody to look at. That's the first step for those SOC analysts. That's what we're looking to train into them.
I noticed that you liked it when Cyberbit made life easy for you, but you enjoyed making life hard for your students. I see the parallelism there. But Nick, when you saw these students leave your program, this was intense, right? This was full-time for 8 weeks. This is pretty intense. What did you see happen in their career? They've got this hyper-realistic training. They're learning how to critically think, all that kind of stuff. What happened to their career, say, 6 months, a year, 18 months later?
So generally speaking, they're all employed, that's number one good thing. Yeah, they maintain their employment, and they're generally doing better than their peers for that. So their prospects for promotion or for shift choice, which is often the first mini promotion that a junior analyst gets, is a better shift. Yeah, are better because they have the ability to dig into that training and hit the ground faster, running faster, doing a better job at the tasks that will get them noticed for those. And then later,
did you also find. Sorry, go ahead. But as you answered, I think I was also wondering, did you also find that they better found what they were more suited towards: offensive, defensive, analyst, audit, social engineering?
Right. So within the program, they kind of know before they're done what they like, what they're good at. We like to show them at least a little bit of everything. So we're not going to show them a full course in penetration testing or Red Hat, but we'll show them one so that they understand how the enemy is thinking, because that will help in any of their defensive abilities as well. And if they're good at that, then or they like that, that's a way that they can then progress their careers, and they have that idea from day one. Because that's in the security world, you start in the SOC analysts, but we like to hire internal for a lot of those jobs. It's easier to trust somebody to do your own penetration testing if they've already been working as a defense person for a year. You know them, you know their techniques and their skills. So each of those careers that branch off from analyst, they have a leg up because they understand better the job that they want to get into after this.
Thanks. So now you've developed them, you've watched them accelerate their careers. get into the different things, find quicker what they wanted to do, all sounds good. But if I come back to this particular audience, where we want to leave them with like one golden nugget, like one, if you were to leave this podcast and go next week to help improve your program, what might be one nugget you really want to leave them with to go do to improve the caliber of the students that they graduate?
Get hands-on as soon as possible, and add stress where you can.
So don't wait till the junior and senior year. Introduce it like early on.
Give it so as soon as they have, like, can they log into Windows and understand what a Windows domain is? Great. Show them how to how to break a Windows domain, and then make them fix one, and then make them fix one with a timer on it.
We're absolutely seeing this. We're seeing this from, again, undergraduates, first year students that are working with us are diving into the cyber range and just getting hands-on from day one. You can see the difference for sure. Adam, you want to move to the Q&A or anything else from your perspective that you wanted to ask?
Yeah, we'll move to the Q&A, and I'll tee up a couple of topics looking at the questions. In a few weeks, we're going to interview a guy who's developed a full, detailed curriculum that's also hyper-realistic, that's called Pisces. We're going to interview Mike Hamilton about that program. We're also going to interview one of the founders of Alstom, and some of the great open source work that has proliferated in cybersecurity. That a lot of people don't know the source of that, but Nick, our friend Pete Herzog, will be on. We'll interview him as well. Awesome. These will be future topics we'll go into detail with. So some of the questions we'll get to, but I want to come back to a question that Carla mentions here. Do I have a military background? I was a military defense contractor for years, but I was never in the military, just worked a lot with them. But she makes this point about, like a soldier who's given some slides, I'm assuming like PowerPoint slides, and then sending them out. Absolutely. I mean, you can tell Nick and I are both kind of snarky guys. And it's like, I would tell my students, if knowledge was the answer, I would look like Brad Pitt and have six-pack abs, none of which is true. So you have to work at this, and there's no substitute for time on task. And that time on task starts with something. If you look at the theory of learning, like what did Seth Godin say? It's serial failure on your way to mastery. So you make it within reach, but difficult, progressively more so throughout the program. And you build that grit, which Angela Duckworth and others have shown us, you actually can build that grit. The military is pretty good at that. So I like her analogy there. But Nick, you accelerated that in just an 8-week program. So if you've got more to add, give some color commentary to my words.
Sure. So yeah, I do have some military experience way back there, but it is very much in the idea that you can't show them slides and expect them to go out and do it. And also, like the military is doing, you started immediately. You don't need to start at the 300 level courses. You start early. You build them up and give them stress. The like Marine Corps boot camp, the psychology that goes into that, there are thousands of papers written specifically on how bad to make that and how to make it survivably stressful. It's a masterwork in how to form a group and a team. So it works. And to do it in 8 weeks with a cadre of students is possible, but because so many of these educators here they've got 4 years or 2 years to do it, you can do as much or more in 2 years that you can do in 8 weeks. So if I could encourage everybody to start it earlier, it doesn't have to be so shockingly stressful to students that something like mine is a way to bring knowledge into skills and an ability in a shorter term time that builds on what you've done as educators. But if you can do what I'm doing as educators, and if you do, you will make your program better, and it will put me out of a job, which is fine.
I think I'm
happy to retire.
If you think, I think Carlos' analogy is amazing, because if you think of what does an airman do during the course of their onboarding and getting ready. It's basically jumping into a simulator pretty much from day one, and then jumping into actual live practice. Or if you look at a soldier, again, you do a lot of simulations, you simulate as an individual, and then you start doing training as a team. So look at even as a sports person, you do your individual shots and then you do it as a team. So it's a lot of simulations, and the simulator, I think, is the key here. And that's why I love the airman analogy, because today you have that's something you have and you can actually do. You can actually immerse them into a simulator, build their individual skills hands-on, and then even put them into the real world situations as a team, which is what you've talked about in terms of stress. It's really responding to an incident as a team. When we look at organizations or at individuals or teams that are doing well, they are those that practiced as a team, that know how to work together, to communicate. It's not even about the security tools or the technical background is important, but if you don't know how to communicate, to work under pressure, to be creative, to communicate with your peers, you're not going to be successful, even if you've done all the technical skill development in the world.
Thanks, guys. Angie asks a question here where she mentions about overseeing a master's program in engineering with a specialization in cybersecurity. What jobs are out there for those graduates? I have, I think I mentioned this in one of our prior podcasts, I have sort of a contrarian view of master's programs and PhDs in cybersecurity, depending on what your career path is. But Nick, what's your initial response to that question?
Security engineering is a huge thing in and of itself.
A master's program in engineering.
Right. So the idea to start, so if you're coming out of like a CE background, so if that's you're getting a stamp, there are definitely some routes to go there. But if you're looking at a engineering but not stamped engineers specifically, then that's mostly architecture roles and infrastructure. So you've got things like building out secure environments, and so architect and overseeing the development and design groups, if that's where they're coming out of. That's a pretty lucrative career right now, especially in the cloud space. Then if you're looking at others with, if somebody came to me with a master's in engineering in cybersecurity, I would expect them either on the high level network side, or and so it commensurate with something like a Cisco CCIE, or high level in the admin side. So probably Windows network or Windows administration, or then tool development and tool deployment. So we've got people all over the place. You put a Palo Alto out, and then you need to set it up, and that's not generally going to be a SOC analyst or even anybody in the security operations center. That's going to be in secure infrastructure, and they'll have a whole set of things to host and do with that. And there are quite a few jobs available and open for that, and a lot of those in the cloud should be what I think you're looking for if you want your graduates to be most broadly successful.
Yeah, my contrarian view of that is I've mentored probably 25 different current or about to graduate masters or above in cybersecurity, and they were having a hard time finding a job because they didn't have real world experience, even if it's in a quote unquote hyper realistic range experience. They had a lot of theory, they had a lot of work that they had done, but not in the real world. And so sometimes they needed to back themselves up of what their expectations would be in the job, humble themselves and go in and learn the hands-on skills. Some of them, surprising to me, graduated without some of the hands-on skills and understanding how real operations run and what real threats are, how to reduce the attack surface and the importance of asset management and, those kinds of the basics. But they were some of the hardest to help get jobs. So anyway, let's move on.
Yeah. Adam, just to interfere with just for the audience, I see there's a lot of questions coming in the Q&A, which is amazing. If any of you wants to open up your microphone and answer live, just raise your hand and in the raise hand button below, and we'll unmute you if you'd like to ask live. If not, just feel free to type in, but remember that you have that option as well. Back to you, Adam.
Awesome, thanks. And then Doc Elder asked the question about what I'll call like the AI analytics arms race. Machine learning and analytics should be able to be trained to know usual patterns for an organization and detect anomalies better than analysts after a few years of data are fed, shouldn't it? How do you respond, Nick?
Yes, it should. It doesn't. Much like, so depending on where you are in the self-driving cars world, this could be a political statement, but with Tesla, right? I own one, I've driven one, it's driven me. It drives safer than a human, but it doesn't drive like a human. So it will do weird things under certain circumstances. That's been my experience with machine learning and analytics. It should be able to be trained for usual patterns, and it's going to find interesting patterns that we don't. But humans, it turns out, are pattern engines. We are some of the best. We're the best at finding patterns of anything that we know of, and we have years of doing that. I've got 40 years of doing that. So until we can get AI to work at that level for me, we're not ever going to have the ability to totally get rid of the junior level analyst who is looking over AI's shoulder. I'm happy if we can. That work is boring, and I'd much prefer them to be working at something a little bit more interesting in their lives. And AI is doing a lot to help that. I remember doing this with just incidents and filters, and not SOARs and platforms for that. SOARs are better, but we still do need more intuition than I'm seeing out of any of the major machine learning.
Nick, I guess get back to the military analogy. I guess once we have machine learning and AI replacing the military, it's probably going to be more or less at the same time, I guess.
That's probably true.
Yeah.
Shani Tesler has a request of the audience. I have done a healthcare startup before, but I am not an expert by any stretch in healthcare. But she has a great one for this audience. If people are interested in helping her with her high functioning advisory group, she's given her contact in there. Ask people to reach out, see if you can help her. Then Joseph asked a question: what are the baseline technical knowledge that students must know in order to build their ability to be successful in cyberspace? Nick, your thoughts?
None. I've read your question, and you don't need to know what a computer is in detail. You don't need to know what software is in detail. You need to understand the basic connections between node points. So you need to understand that somebody is using a computer, and that the computer can be compromised, the person can be compromised, and the method of communication between them can be compromised. And then you can teach how each of those is compromised. But the deepness of technical detail is vestigial at this point. I don't need to know how a specific piece of software runs to know that software can be attacked. And the research into once that software is attacked, I can research it, or I can find a developer who knows that information. Now, for HR, they're going to want this is the problem of HR hiring versus manager hiring. HR is going to put down on the thing that they want to see that you have got 15 years of developing and deploying Java. And JavaScript, and they won't know which one is which because they're HR. But the truth of it is that when you're looking at the technical knowledge students need to start this, it's minimal. And the security we are beginning to understand is its own discipline rather than needing to be a discipline of networks or administration. But we have, for as long as computers have existed and security for those computers has been required, we've been pulling people from networking and administration to train them in security. That's how we get them. And so we kind of assume that it's needed. It's not. You can start them with security and move them down that path. One of my best students actually came to us without the ability to type more than 40 words per minute, and her previous job had been managing a Jack in the Box. She was a community college student who joined us as an internship and was in her first year of community college, and was a non-native English speaker. And she's got a $150,000 job 5 years on, running. She's actually a lead analyst now at a major financial.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but I'm coming to you from Zanzibar, and in my day job, I have IT and security issues all over the world. And one of my top developers was from Myanmar, who learned how to program without a computer. He learned how to program, writing it down, sending it off to somebody to see if his code would work, and getting it back. We had one of our top graduates in an academy who was a dental implant specialist, meaning he would machine these things, who had incredible attention to detail. And I didn't think that's not really a big fit for cybersecurity. And then I found out that his hobby was cracking safes. So he's a problem solver, and he's insatiably curious, and he has attention to detail. And so while I like the Tri-Hack-Me's and the Holiday Hack Hackathon or the Holiday Hack Challenge that the folks at CounterHack run every year, these are great exercises to see people have this kind of curiosity and attention to detail, but also they just love solving problems and working with people. And interesting, one of the exercises we'll talk about in a future podcast was I introduced our students to games where I tell them, there are no rules. And Nick, I say this over and over again, there are no rules, but then I put them into teams, and their first mental model is, well, this must be a competition. Like, how many times did I say there are no rules? Then we teach them critical thinking and come back to that, stress-inducing environment. And we've been able to measure it, similar to our the last person we interviewed here, Dr. Seth Hammond, about how to think like the attacker. And you can demonstrate the ability to prove their ability to handle under pressure and critically think really quite quickly. They're just not, most programs don't introduce that. So I know we're running out of time here pretty soon. And I wanted to ask you, Nick, if you were to think about one thing that you're like, why isn't this done in the community or for you? Why isn't this done there? What might you think they could and should have done before they came to your program, before they came to work with American Express or something?
So it's generally speaking, in all ways, it's not having enough hands-on experience. It really does come back to that always. We can tell when we interview them, and we can tell on both sides. Like, even so, we call them paper tigers. Somebody who's got 15 certs because they were able to do the knowledge part of it. But you get them and you put them in a room and you ask them to do something basic in front of 6 people they don't know, and they can't. Whether that's they probably have the knowledge, but they don't have the understanding and the applicability of that knowledge because they haven't had the opportunity to do it hands-on. So when I ask, like, how there's that, the interview questions, how have you fixed something, or how did you deal with a major incident at your last company? And if they can't remember it, you say, well, all right, how would you deal with this breach? Or this is the activity. Your CEO has been email has been compromised. What do you want to do? If they've tried it once, just once, then they can look and they think, and you see them look back in their heads and think what they did this last time, and they have that basis. If they've only learned the knowledge of business email compromise is bad, they can't look back on that and understand it and they can't answer that question in my interview, and that down checks them for the interview. And if they can answer that question in my interview and can't do it on the floor, then they're doing themselves a disservice anyway. They're there and they don't know how it's running. So give them the hands-on. Let them have that time on keyboard doing the work.
And Joseph asked the question here about, the answer seems to fit individuals and may not general institutions. I do have to admit I'm old school. Teach them how to think, not what to think. Use your time, time on task with these students, Joseph, and get them hands-on in this stuff. Teach them how to think. What are these challenges? What's the joy that they can see in solving their own problems and building their own competencies, not just knowledge and skills, but the competencies that it takes to be a professional in this field. And when they're in that interview and they're using those words and speaking that language, it comes out in the interview. And I know we're running out of time, and Sharon and Nick,
I think,
so much for this time together. Two key questions.
I want to respond in terms of Joseph's question. I think it doesn't contradict. To build the learning layer does not contradict with providing the experiential or the practical layer. I think it's a profession that has both elements, and the question is how well prepared would you like your graduates to be? And the reality is, and we work with a lot of institutions, both on the higher education side and on the corporate side, and there is a graduate that does not get that experience in school during the academic program needs a few months, and if they don't have a great program like Nick's, which could be 8 weeks, they need about 6 months of onboarding or on-the-job training or whatever it means to start being operational. And if you produce a graduate that has that experience, those are preferred graduates. Those are the graduates that the industry wants to see. They will get hired faster. They'll get promoted faster. So I think it's just something that is worth considering. It's possible to keep it on the learning side, but that requires a lot more learning on the job, and that's something that we're seeing.
I can actually, I think, go a little further than that. I don't suggest that institutions of higher learning become hands-on training grounds only.
Right.
I suggest that as you build up those layers of knowledge, that rather than merely testing the knowledge, you give them the opportunity to turn that knowledge into a skill, so that they can, rather than the standard set of give them knowledge, test the knowledge, move on. At certain points in your curriculum, be that at a midterm or at a final, give them the opportunity to synthesize that knowledge in a range that they can be tracked in, and that they can be given feedback and do it hands-on as part of your building knowledge.
Yeah, you guys said it so well. And I apologize. There's so many questions here I'd love to get to, but we'll need
to conclude. Sorry about this. But get in touch with us later on LinkedIn or through our website. If I know there's a couple more questions that we just didn't have the time to ask. It's great to have all these questions.
I'd love it if everybody in the Q&A would put a name in. And Nick, I'll ask you, who do you think we should interview to be the best service to our audience here? Who should we interview next?
So I've got a couple people who are also in the financial world. If you can get, so Ann Baron DiCamillo, who I worked with at American Express when she was there, who now runs the city's global SOC and came out of Department of Homeland Security. She has a really interesting perspective on women in STEM, on how to educate for that. And then she has both the government and financial experience, which I think would be really interesting for you and for your listeners, and how that transition works. There's a lot of people coming out of the military here on GI Bill who are going back to school for things like cyber. And I think that she could offer a interesting industry perspective from that at a higher level. So if you can get her, that'd be a good grab.
We're gonna chase her. All right. Thank you very much. I'll thank you in a moment, but before all the attendees leave, I want to make you aware of an important event that's being run these days as we speak. It's called the ICL Collegiate Cup, the International Cyber League Collegiate Cup. I don't know, Shahar, if you can type the URL in the Q&A, but if you just Google Cyberbit ICL, we're running a pretty massive cyber range tournament. It's targeted at undergrads and bachelor's degree students. Thank you. You got the link in the Q&A right now. So we'd love anyone who's running an undergrad or bachelor's program. We're going to run students through live and cyber challenges and cyber attacks. It's not a capture the flag. This is not a CTF. This is not a hacking competition. This is a cyber defense simulation competition, a very unique one, probably something unlike anything they've done before. So if you go into that link and you'd like to register a team, it's entirely free. There's pretty massive prizes, gaming laptops, VR headsets, you name it. So encouraging anyone who's not there, we've got quite nice registration already, but if you'd like to register your institution, go ahead to the ICL link and go ahead and register a team. So just wanted you to be aware of that. And then I'd like to thank you again, Nick. It was awesome. It was awesome to learn from you. I think it was a great opportunity for the audience to learn from the industry, which is, we don't get that opportunity very often. And Adam, of course, as always, it was a pleasure. Enjoy your travel. I want to thank the audience for being here. Like I said, you will be able to find Cyber Sensei on Spotify, including previous episodes, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, etc., on the Cyberbit YouTube channel, and of course on our website, and follow Cyberbit on LinkedIn for updates on upcoming episodes. And of course, connect to Adam, to Nick, or to myself for any future questions on LinkedIn. Thank you very, very much, and looking forward to see you in our next episode. We'll try to get the speakers that you asked for.